I guess the violences and the valences of the EU and the EU project and the European project, because we are going to Albania. But what we're doing with this film, so Europa is by Sudabeh Mortezai, sort of an Austrian-Iranian filmmaker. This is a film that explores in some of the ways that Radio Jude does, the kind of integration of Europe's fringes and undeveloped fringes with the kind of the Mittel Europe center of business, capital, finance, Germany. So we get our main character, who's again a kind of Nina Hoss, Aldi Nina Hoss. Basically, she's like a young Nina Hoss, kind of ice queen corporate entity in a kind of Christian Petzold vein, tradition of Nina Hoss playing characters in yellow who are, business suited, sort of lanyard wearers. Yeah. And she's on mission in
the sort of friendly feminine face of hard capital.
Yeah, of hard capital, yeah, before the attack dogs get sent in. So she's in Albania on an unspecified kind of commercial enterprise, which is basically a development enterprise. Her job is to basically convince...
It's not quite clear what development...
It's intentionally ambiguous in Anodyne, because these big corporate entities, have really... Their project is capital. They don't have a specific thing. They're just they're mediators and financial
service provision.
Service provision. A company called Europa, which is also the name of the film.
I mean, the service could be advanced interrogation, or it can also be delivery of school meals. It doesn't really...
Yeah. And in fact, it begins with a great bit of whitewashing. She's there initially to present a scholarship program in Albanian University. So we think it's a kind of...
She gives a very girl boss speech all about
completely empty and shallow.
Completely empty and shallow, yeah.
She is this kind of demonic, dead-eyed Hillary.
This is the most sort of satirical register the film reaches. Very early on, it sort of sets out its stall as a kind of parody of this woman. But then it enters parody of... Then it enters drama. Yeah,
it enters drama. So a character, it's I've seen there's quite a lot of films like this, and they're always quite good. She's trying to convince smallholders in the Albanian countryside to sell up so they can build X, some sort of project in the countryside, which is slowly revealed is not just any project. It's slightly militarized. There's something. It's a security apparatus. This thing they're doing.
There's a real compulsion. What's beautiful, and like so many films that we talk about recently, there's a lot withheld, and you're kept wrapped by it, by knowing that there's something really important that needs to be done on this land, and you're only ever told what the current owners of this land
like the smallholders in a way. These Albanian farmers who practice a particular form of syncretic Islam. You are kept in the dark as well about the intentions. So it's not trying to be passive and hold you back. You obviously sympathise with these people, and you don't sympathise the more that you're exposed to this woman whose character's name I forget. This ice queen. The more you're exposed to her, the more kind of the way that, and the film is quite on the nose about pointing out the ways in which she's shallow and these people live a very rich tradition. We get a scene where they're slaughtering a goat, and we get this great bit of ethnographic film following the process of the slaughtering of a goat, and then we'll cut to her doing yoga in the garden of the house.
But also there's like a kind of dialectical ambivalence to these dynamics, and there's one scene where she says to one of these families, you're nowhere near a school, your daughter wants to be a doctor. Why don't we're offering you the chance, we'll pay you to move out of this place.
Yeah,
and this guy's like, well. My doctor will be whatever I want her to be. Right. So you're not these people aren't completely.
Yeah, it's not a hagiography of a simpler.
Yeah, they're not
noble savages.
Exactly. They have their own. There's their power dynamics within power dynamics.
And I think it's quite acute in terms of observing how particular discourses of women's liberation in particular can be actually used to inscribe countries into a sort of kind of neo-colonial setup.
Yeah, because that's what she's using.
For instance, the daughter becomes the cunning ploy to entice her father into this dubious contract, which will divest him of his ancestral home, and it will all get demolished, right? Because
and his business, his means of living,
right? And so this scholarship program, which we see at the beginning, is actually the carrot used.
It's a piece of whitewashing, isn't it? But it's also an instrument. It's a surgical instrument.
So it's quite fun how it dramatizes. I think these CSR dynamics, the kind of human face of
CSR.
Corporate social responsibility. And we never, and in terms of withholding, we're never quite told the means by which she manages to convince him. to embark into this
it'll inevitably
contract.
happen. She wears him down. Yeah, he's facing the inevitable. But
Well, I think she works on the daughter, doesn't she?
Well,
She
it's something
works on
to do with the beekeeping, because there's a point where the daughter points out that the thing that
the bees can be moved elsewhere.
Yeah, exactly.
and
gives
he's
her
like,
father
fair
most satisfaction.
But there's a great scene where she admits this. You know, she stumps up, and we get a rare insight into how this character really thinks. And she says, you know, because she often talks in platitudes and reacts in these kind of platitudinous, you know, very artificial ways. And she says to the daughter, and the daughter's like, "How will I convince my father? He's a very stubborn man." She says, "Well, you might have to manipulate him." She's like, "I don't want to manipulate him." She's like, "Well, all dialogue, all conversation is manipulation."
Yeah, but even then, I don't think we should even postulate here a kind of real character, because this character, it's all like for freedom's effect, it's all like total alienation. I mean, there is, and what I think the strength of this film is that it doesn't suggest that there is any that there's anything beneath this woman's
no, she's
outward veneer. Like
we get little scenes of her kind of zooming, like Zoom calling her family.
I don't think we needed it personally.
I was happy with those scenes, but they didn't actually add any important
because the high camp of her kind of evil corporate persona.
Yeah, I suppose
she's accompanied by a rather ineffective high camp senior man whose acting is like weird, incongruously bad compared to everyone else.
It had the quality. He was this real automaton, this like business kind of American, big kind of broad American who was like kind of flirting with her in a kind of slightly patronizing way, and kind of his dialogue was very kind of corporate AI generator. It was like, you know, we have to run this up the flag with legal, sort of all these like.
Which maybe it was sort of sending up a bit, but in a kind of burn after reading Coen Brothers,
because they meet in this really anodyne kind of anywhere bar with a neon sign.
It looked a lot like the Picture House.
The Picture House
we've been spending a lot of time doing this.
But I think there was something. So what the film does, I think. I was quite happy with how it was shot. You know, it knew when to. I mean, there's a lot of visual humor in these kind of wide shots of landscapes, because
also some gorgeous scenes just there for their own merit, like the kids playing football and
there's some nice bits, but it's a great the visual that uses the landscape in those wide shots to satirize the corporate language, because she keeps telling these farmers. There's one scene where she's like, you know, she's talking to a translator, tell him, you know, that they're living in an unsafe, uninhabitable environment, and then we're seeing these beautiful
magnificent.
I also love the way that translation, like you really had to read the subs and listen, because there were these lovely little slips where the translation would be slightly different than what was said.
Everything is being mediated through a translator.
Exactly. Who's our agent to get in here. So sometimes she would actually say something a bit softer, and he would translate it in a slightly harsher way.
There's like a big, bulky, bald translator. He was a bit of a heavy, and he was like a bit like later on. There's a security guard who's of the same style, who like is saying in Albanian to this guy. He's saying like, "Don't make me beat you up. I'm going to have to beat you up if you keep doing this." Like there's this way in which the Albanians are talking to each other. And like the way they're carrying out these orders, these different, like it's a really good film.
They've been
about
Uncle Tom'd in a way. Some of these kind of more elite ones who have got access to the English language and have got finance. They're actually, you know, in a position of power over these villages because they're not from there. Really, you know, when the translator goes to the local church, the priest says to him, I never see you here. You know, he's kind of calling him out for like, you know, being separate from his bedrock in the community that sustained him. And he's kind of wielding his power now in his kind of fancy Carhartt gilet or whatever it is, you know, kind of, you know, he's kind of heavy handing the locals and the farmers, who obviously disdains a bit, because he's like, this is a good deal, you're going to get money. And their stubbornness is completely understandable. They live in this pastoral idyll. Life is hard, but, you know, they live close to the land and have, you know, obviously a deep well of faith, which only makes her kind of lack of faith and her vape and her refusal to eat the local food. Yeah, completely vacuous. I know I'm vaping, but there's something about she refuses the cigarette, you know, to have a cigarette with people, and she says, no, I've got my own.
And they constantly invite her, like they have this hosting thing. At one point I wondered whether they were going to poison her, because they keep offering her like raki and then all these meals.
But that's it. There is that, you know, she's being extended such hospitality the entire, and she's this kind of like,
and she feels bad. It's not that she doesn't really have a moment of feeling guilt, but like part of her ambivalence to being fed all this food is like that she's vegan or whatever, but like part of it is that like she knows she's there to take from them. So like the idea that she's then like accepting gifts. I mean, even at the end, the people who sort of the B&B people who've hosted her in the village give her all these gifts and
all this jam.
It's just a total pain in the ass having to receive all this stuff that she's obviously going to throw in the bin or give to dogs, you know. So it's
we see her feeding the meat dinner to dogs. You know, the sheep's head that they've specially cooked is a sign of respect to her.
God, my mouth was watering that moment.
I think I think this film managed to very successfully kind of sustain a particular like levity, but the comedy wasn't like. It wasn't anxious. It was and there was a real like kind of calm to it. Even the pacing, the rhythm of her just visiting one thing after the other. And we know there is going to be one great punctual moment of violence, but also it withheld the satisfaction somehow.
Well, it gave it to us at the beginning because the film opens. It's basically it's a Mobius strip. This film, isn't it? Yeah. So we start off this guy on the windshield of a car. Banging through the glass, and they're trying to.
And it's filmed. It's filmed on the phone. I think it looks like exactly. It's a kind of. So the film. I don't want to give too much away, but basically there's a sort of there's a very arresting opening shot, which then like
the film tells us how we got there.
And then like we just go straight into.
And I really like that as a device.
Clean,
you know,
clean,
it was. I really like that as a device. I think it was really clever, Beautiful. And it just meant it opened with a real bravura. I was immediately. I was
the snapshot.
I think this is going to be good.
And this levity to me like. To telling the story of corporate malfeasance, instead of going kind of either zany mode with it, burn after reading style, or doing the severity of something like Zivgintsev's Leviathan, which is also a story of a kind of a guy, or a kind of Aaron Brockovich contest. I mean, I like that film, but
it's good.
It didn't have any gags in it.
No, it's very
there are some very dry. I mean, we have to remember we're not Russian. Russians
does have a great gag in the court scene where the prosecutor is talking so fast. And
True.
There's a funny bit with a picture of Putin. I don't know. I think like Russia, like Zviagintsev films do have jokes.
The beats come in
like
different
when you're British,
areas,
you don't always get them because they're so dark.
But this was quite universal in its humor because again, the kind of common language is English anyway. So there's a lot of like falling back into English language. And I think one of the great things as well is about this kind of corporate. This non-place corporate mannequin of this woman is incredible because there's a certain kind of sugary insincerity to her reactions. You know, when the girl buys her a coffee and she has like soy milk, and she's like, "That's so pleasant that you have remembered that I drink soy milk."
Amazing contradictions,
and it's completely empty.
I've met so many people like her. She really the performance is so good, and it really nails.
She's international school.
It really nails this like citizen of nowhere almost.
Totally.
Like this really alienated.
She's kind of McKinsey.
Yeah, this alienated like
drone, isn't she?
Global functionary.
Yeah, like friendly functionary whose sole purpose is to like get certain things from certain people, and she moves through the world with this totally like normal friendliness and the film gives you this beautiful intimacy of seeing her in lots of different contexts, and that's why I think actually it's quite important seeing her in this Zoom call with her family, even though those bits are quite underpowered. The fact of their underpoweredness, I think, does bolster like some of the other moments there.
Well, it gets us to
she's a normal, ordinary person. It's the banality of evil. She's a normal, ordinary person.
You can imagine a well-thumbed copy of the 48 Rules of Power, like on somewhere on her bookshelf at home.
Yeah, we've got this kind of it is this kind of banality. We see her able to, and it's maybe something that will get picked up by Glazer as well when we watch Zone of Interest. But the kind of ordinary family life that persists at the core of this person's life, whereas the edges where they do real damaging dark work and they don't let it affect them. They're able to
damaging
cut
dark work
emotionally.
The damaging dark work, we like the really dark thing. We only see a short one scene.
And even then, it's played for laughs and in quite interesting manner.
Are we talking about the young kind of urban explorers?
So we won't say. I don't really want to give away too much because this review is really an endorsement, really like a gesture to say you probably weren't thinking of seeing this film, and you should.
You really should, yeah.
And there is, if you have seen it, there's just this amazing. Almost reminded me of Reality. The Reality when a biopic Tina Satter that we reviewed in Berlin. Like it has this real clinical carrying out orders, sort of like, and it's a huge reveal. It really like snaps you in. I mean, it's a very gripping film throughout, but it really like you have these sort of slowly scenes of like her negotiating and trying to be friendly and
gentle art,
these kind of awkward things. Yeah, and then you're suddenly like.
The gloves are off.
The gloves are off, and you're in, and it's completely different characters you're dealing with.
And it's shot differently as well. It's shot in this kind of 0:30 Catherine Bigelow style. It suddenly flips.
But you suddenly learn a lot more than you did know you knew before, but not the full don't learn everything about what it is she's doing.
It's kind of weird. So when we were talking about like early Christian Petzold as well, and I think I was talking about this kind of Maastricht minimalism of it, and something that the kind of Christian Petzold is doing. He's actually looking at the kind of
Maastricht, as in the Maastricht Treaty.
Maastricht Treaty, yes.
Brussels,
exactly. So he's. And then, there he's looking at the kind of interior, the damage that is done in the heartland of Middle Europe itself, right? But here we're looking at the edges, and there's a lot of dialogue about, the fringes of, empire, where the real bloody work is done, right?
Yeah.
And it's kind of interesting that we see it in this kind of European context. It's about story of integration, but it's like the other side of the coin of a Christian Petzold film. I think it would make a great double bill. Like
it is like Sudabeh, who explores this in her film Western, which is about sort of a kind of neo-colonial encampment of Germans in Bulgaria, which is actually based on.
And I think this kind of filmmaking is interesting because it's like particularly at the time when I'm bored to tears with Ramonas, who are so. Indifferently kind of Europhilic and seal clapping about the European project as the idea of the European project, but the reality of it is quite blood and guts. And
that's in a way why it's a good gesture almost that the film is called Europa. It's called Europa because the company, the sort of G4S Serco style outsourced security firm that she works for, is called Europa. But it actually
and it's a story of Europe,
very coherent, and it is a story of Europe. It's a story of two Europe.
And I wondered I was wondering, is it in dialogue at all with Lars von Trier's Europa? Maybe not. I mean, I was searching for some sorts of.
I don't know if it
parallels,
is,
but
I think it's in dialogue more with the filmmakers we mentioned. These kind of. I think people like Petzold
and Jude in a way, although the filmmaker wouldn't have seen because these two films came out at the same time. But Haneke to an extent, but improves upon Haneke in my opinion. But then I'm always very, very critical of Haneke.
And it's a good story as well.
Great story.